For 5 decades, the world watched Dr. Phil McGraw hand out advice on love, loyalty, and what makes a marriage survive. But there's a wife the cameras never showed you, a marriage she buried so deep, even his most dedicated fans almost missed it. After several decades of silence, she finally spoke up about the horrors she endured during her marriage to Dr. Phil. What she revealed didn't just contradict his story. It painted the picture of a man who may be living a double life the world doesn't know about. The first marriage to Debbie Higgins. McCall, every story has a beginning, and for Dr. Phil McGraw, the story of his marriages starts in the suburbs of Kansas City. Before the television cameras and the millions of viewers who would come to know him as the straight-talking psychologist on daytime television, Phil had a teenage romance that seemed to follow a script written long before either of them stepped onto the stage. Philip Calvin McGraw met Debbie Higgins in the late 1960s at Shawnee Mission North High School in Overland Park, Kansas. They were young and popular, and by the standards of their community, they made perfect sense together. Debbie was the kind of girl who stood out in a crowd, an elegant cheerleader with the kind of poise that made her a natural center of attention. Phil, on the other hand, was impossible to miss for a different reason. He was a varsity football player with a heavy build and a presence that suggested he was going places. In the social ecosystem of high school, the pairing of a cheerleader and a football player was not just common, it was expected. Phil would later reflect on this dynamic in a 2002 interview with Newsweek. He explained that because of who they were in high school, the big football player and the cheerleader, everyone around them simply assumed marriage was the next step. It was not so much a decision they made as it was an inevitability that their social circle treated as a foregone conclusion. When you are at the top of the high school hierarchy, he suggested, the expectations of those around you can become a powerful force. And for 2 teenagers in Overland Park, those expectations pointed in only one direction. The 2 began dating seriously in their teenage years, and by the time they were both 20 years old, the relationship had moved past the casual stage. They had grown up together in many ways, navigating the transition from adolescence to adulthood as a couple. But marriage, as they would soon discover, is a different kind of commitment than dating, and the ease with which they had moved through high school did not necessarily translate into ease in their married life. The formal engagement, by most accounts, was relatively brief. They had been together for years, and the wedding seemed like the logical culmination of everything they had built. In 1970, they stood before family and friends at the Roland Park Southbridge Presbyterian Church in Kansas and exchanged vows. It was a traditional ceremony, the kind of large church wedding that brought together extended family, high school classmates, and local peers. The church was filled with people who had watched them grow up, people who had cheered for Phil on the football field and admired Debbie on the sidelines. To everyone in attendance, it must have looked like the beginning of a storybook life. But what happens inside a marriage is often invisible to the people who attend the wedding. Behind closed doors, the reality of their partnership began to take shape, and it did not resemble the fairy tale that their friends and family had imagined. According to public statements made by Debbie's brother, Bill Higgins, and confirmed by Debbie in later interviews, Phil entered the marriage with very specific expectations about what a wife should be. He wanted a traditional 1950s-style housewife, a woman who would stay home, manage the domestic chores, and attend to his needs. The word submissive appears repeatedly in descriptions of what he demanded. This was not a partnership in the modern sense. It was a relationship defined by roles, and Debbie's role was clearly laid out for her. The demands went beyond household duties. Debbie later revealed that Phil was deeply concerned about her physical appearance and set rigid aesthetic standards that she was expected to maintain. He was insecure about certain aspects of her body, and his response to that insecurity was to push her toward changes that would alleviate his anxieties. He insisted that she lift weights to alter her physique and explicitly pressured her to increase her upper body size. These were not gentle suggestions offered out of concern for her health. They were demands rooted in his own discomfort, and they placed an enormous burden on a young woman who had only recently become a wife. Despite the intensity of their early relationship and the years they had spent together before marriage, the union produced no children. There is a common misconception that the couple had a daughter, a confusion that likely arises from the fact that Debbie would later have a child with her second husband. That daughter, Macy McCall, was not Phil's child and was born years after the marriage had ended. During the 3 years that Phil and Debbie spent as husband and wife, they remained childless, a detail that would later become one of the many points of speculation about what went wrong. One of the most striking aspects of this marriage, at least from the perspective of the historical record, is its total absence from the public eye. This was not a marriage that played out in front of cameras or in the pages of celebrity magazines. Phil was not yet Dr. Phil. He was just Phil McGraw, a young man trying to figure out his path in life, far from the television studios and the national spotlight that would one day make him a household name. Their marriage existed in a private sphere known only to those who lived in Overland Park and the surrounding community. However, the truth behind the marriage was far more complicated and troubling. The marriage had ended for reasons that went beyond the usual incompatibilities. And when Debbie finally decided to speak, the things she revealed would paint a picture of Dr. Phil McGraw that his millions of fans had never seen. The contentious divorce and fallout. The marriage had started as a high school romance and a traditional church wedding, but it soon descended into something far more troubled. According to Debbie's later accounts, the domestic environment eroded rapidly after the marriage began. Phil started what she described as freezing her out, a pattern of emotional and verbal withdrawal that left her isolated. When he returned home from work or from school, he routinely refused to speak to her. The silence was not the comfortable quiet of two people who knew each other well. It was a deliberate, punishing withdrawal that made their home feel less like a shared space and more like a place where two people simply occupied the same rooms. The silence was accompanied by something even more damaging. Debbie revealed that Phil began telling her, openly and directly, that she was not intelligent enough to have a proper conversation with him. These were not words spoken in anger and regretted moments later. They were delivered as statements of fact, assessments that he appeared to believe were simply true. By declaring her intellectually inferior, he had created a justification for his withdrawal, a reason to exclude her from the kind of mutual exchange that forms the foundation of any healthy partnership. The extent of the fracture became almost incomprehensible during a family road trip. The couple traveled for multiple days to visit relatives, spending hours upon hours in the car together, and according to Debbie, they drove the entire distance without exchanging a single word. No conversation about the scenery passing by, no discussion of the family they were about to see, no attempt to bridge the vast distance that had opened between them. Just silence, hour after hour, mile after mile, a quiet testimony to a marriage that had stopped functioning in any recognizable way. The final breakdown came when neighbors and friends in their community approached Debbie with explicit accounts of Phil's extramarital infidelities. These were not vague rumors or whispered suspicions. They were specific, detailed reports from people who had witnessed or heard about his involvement with other women. For Debbie, the confirmation of what she had likely suspected was devastating. But the confrontation that followed revealed something even more troubling about the man she had married. When Debbie directly confronted Phil about the cheating, he did not deny the allegations. He did not express remorse or ask for forgiveness. Instead, he reportedly defended his actions with a dismissive response that shocked her. He told her to grow up and explained that his behavior was simply the way the world worked. He asserted that his infidelity had nothing to do with his feelings toward her, a statement that, rather than offering comfort or reassurance, revealed a profound disconnect between his understanding of marriage and hers. This was the moment when Debbie understood that the marriage could not be saved. She had endured the silence, the condescension, the emotional neglect, but she was not willing to accept an open marriage or to live with a partner who saw fidelity as optional. In 1973, she made the decision to leave. She packed her belongings, walked out of their shared home, and moved back to Kansas City. The act of leaving was not a dramatic confrontation or a drawn-out negotiation. It was a quiet acknowledgement that the marriage had failed and that staying would only prolong the unhappiness. The legal dissolution that followed took an unusual form. Rather than proceeding through a standard divorce, the couple's marriage ended in a formal annulment-like structure finalized in 1973. This legal distinction effectively erased the structural validity of their union after 3 years, treating it as if it had never been been properly valid in the first place. The details of why they chose this path remain unclear, but the outcome was clear enough. The marriage was over, and legally, it had been undone in a way that went beyond the usual dissolution. The financial settlement, such as it was, reflected the circumstances of the time. Phil was a young student with minimal assets. There was no massive financial payout, no complicated alimony structure, and no bitter battle over property division. The split was legally clean, settled between two people who had very little to divide, but the emotional toll was something else entirely. For Debbie, the marriage had been a painful experience that left her with scars that would take years to heal. For Phil, it was a chapter he would later try to rewrite. Decades later, when the media unearthed the marriage and began asking questions, Phil offered a narrative that bore little resemblance to Debbie's experience. In a 2002 interview with Newsweek, he dismissed the marriage as a peaceful mutual realization. He claimed that they had never had a cross word and that they had simply sat down together and asked themselves why they had done it. The implication was clear. The marriage had been a youthful mistake, a decision made without enough thought, and its end had been amicable and mutual. Debbie, upon reading these words, was furious. She had kept quiet for decades, respecting a private agreement and hoping to move on with her life. But watching Phil portray himself as a relationship guru while whitewashing his own history of domestic control and unfaithfulness was more than she could tolerate. She decided to go public, giving a major interview in which she presented her own version of events. She stated that she had remained silent for years out of a sense of discretion, but that she felt compelled to speak because the public deserved to know the truth about a man who positioned himself as an authority on relationships. Debbie Higgins McCall lived a quiet life after the divorce, working as a film editor and building a new existence far from the public eye. She did not seek the spotlight and did not appear to harbor any desire for revenge, but she also never altered her factual account of the marriage. In 2014, Debbie passed away from cancer. She was survived by her family, including the daughter who had been the subject of so much public confusion over the years. Her death meant that her story would no longer be told by her directly, but the account she had given remained on the record, a counterpoint to the polished narrative that Dr. Phil McGraw had presented to the world. The divorce from Debbie was not the end of Phil's personal life, of course. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one that would introduce him to a woman who would become his partner for the next 5 decades. But the questions raised by his first marriage would follow him, resurfacing every time he offered advice on relationships to his millions of viewers. Phil's marriage to Robin. The dissolution of Phil McGraw's first marriage left a void, and it did not take long for someone new to fill it. His sister, Brenda, played the role of matchmaker, introducing him to a woman named Robin Jo Jameson. The timing was significant. Phil was in the process of extricating himself from his marriage to Debbie, and the annulment was still fresh when he met Robin. The first encounter, by Robin's own account, was not particularly impressive. Phil was not feeling well and came across as less than friendly, but he made up for it the following night with a first date that was anything but ordinary. He had earned his pilot's license at just 16 years old, and he took her flying. For Robin, the experience was transformative. She later described feeling completely safe with him, drawn to his strong presence and his ability to make her feel protected. It was the beginning of a relationship that would last for decades. The couple dated for several years before Phil proposed on Valentine's Day in 1976. They were married exactly 6 months later, on August 14, 1976. The wedding marked the beginning of a partnership that would eventually become as famous as the television show that made Phil a household name. But unlike his first marriage, this one came with rules that were established from the very start. At the core of their marriage was a strict operational agreement. Robin established early on that the word divorce was completely banned from their household. No matter how severe an argument became, neither party was ever allowed to threaten the end of the marriage as leverage. Phil later elaborated on this arrangement, explaining that they made a decision early in their relationship that the relationship itself was never the stake for which they were playing. The idea of divorce was simply off the table. It was not a word that was spoken, not a possibility that was entertained. This rule would become a defining feature of their marriage and a point of fascination for those who followed their public lives. The couple had 2 sons together, Jay and Jordan, and built a life that would eventually place them at the center of American pop culture. But the public nature of their relationship came with a price. When the Dr. Phil show premiered in 2002 and became a massive success, Robin was not merely a supportive spouse in the background. She was contractually and physically present at almost every single recording. For the entire 21-year run of the daytime program, she sat in the front row of the studio audience. At the end of every episode, she walked off stage hand in hand with Phil. This constant visibility was unusual for the spouse of a talk show host, and it invited scrutiny that would only intensify over time. The scrutiny took many forms. Critics and former employees frequently accused their public marriage dynamic of being a highly manufactured corporate brand, designed not to reflect an organic relationship, but to sell self-help products. The argument was that the McGraws had packaged their marriage as a product, a symbol of stability that could be marketed alongside Phil's advice on relationships. The constant presence on the set, the hand-holding at the end of each show, and the carefully curated public image, all of it, in the view of critics, served a commercial purpose rather than an authentic one. Online critics and tabloid media went further, proposing what might be called a vigilance theory. Because Phil's first wife had raised allegations of infidelity, some observers hypothesized that Robin's constant presence on the television set was not an expression of affection, but a calculated effort to watch him closely. The theory suggested that she was monitoring him, keeping him under surveillance to prevent a repeat of the behavior that had ended his first marriage. There was no direct evidence to support this claim, but it persisted in the darker corners of celebrity gossip, fueled by the contrast between the couple's polished public image and the messy history that Debbie had revealed. But the accusations and rumors that plagued them suggested that not everyone believed the story they were selling, and the struggles that followed were not limited to tabloid speculation. The $250 million legal war. The relentless tabloid speculation about the McGraws' marriage had persisted for more than a decade, and by the summer of 2016, Phil and Robin had reached their limit. In July of that year, they filed a $250 million defamation lawsuit in a Florida state court, targeting the publisher responsible for much of the coverage that had plagued them. The defendants were American Media Incorporated, the powerhouse publishing company behind the National Enquirer, Star Magazine, and the website Radar Online. The lawsuit was not a casual legal skirmish. It was a declaration of war against a media empire that had, according to the filing, published more than 85 articles about the McGraws over a 13-year period. The legal team cataloged these articles and argued that they constituted a calculated campaign of asset destruction designed to damage the McGraws' reputations and boost the publisher's flagging finances. The core allegations in the lawsuit were specific and damaging. The articles had claimed that Phil physically confronted Robin, that he had locked her out of their home, and that Robin was living a double life to hide the domestic problems. These were not minor inconveniences or harmless gossip. They were accusations of criminal behavior that, if believed by the public, could destroy the careers of two people whose professional lives depended on their credibility as relationship experts. Robin, in particular, had built a public identity as an advocate for victims of domestic maltreatment. She had started a foundation aimed at helping people in such situations, and the tabloid allegations directly undermined that work. The lawsuit argued that the publications had intentionally targeted the McGraws because their fame and their public stance on domestic violence made them valuable targets for sensational coverage. The legal filing also exposed what the McGraws described as an extortion scheme by AMI editors. The National Enquirer had threatened to publish a bombshell story about Phil's college days, claiming that during the 1970s he had a physical altercation with a man at a Texas Tech University establishment called the Copper Caboose. The story, if published, would have painted Phil as a violent man, a characterization that would have been devastating for a man who presented himself as a voice of reason and authority. But Phil's legal team completely dismantled the tabloid's threat. They produced historical, architectural, and city records proving that the Copper Caboose did not even exist until 6 years after Phil had graduated and left the university. The bar had not been there. The alleged incident could not have happened. The tabloid had either been reckless with the truth or deliberately fabricated the story. The lawsuit was filed with considerable public fanfare, and both sides appeared prepared for a protracted legal battle. The McGraw's attorney, Lynn Wood, issued a statement declaring that his clients had endured years of outrageous lies and had finally concluded that enough was enough. American media responded in kind, saying it looked forward to defending itself and exposing Phil McGraw's claims for what they really were. But then, something unexpected happened. In August 2016, barely a month after filing the massive $250 million lawsuit, court records showed that the McGraws had abruptly filed a motion to dismiss the case with prejudice. The lawsuit was over almost as quickly as it had begun. The dismissal was accompanied by a joint statement confirming that the parties had reached a mutual, out-of-court financial and editorial settlement. The terms of that settlement remain strictly confidential, and neither side has ever revealed what was agreed upon, but the effects were visible. The National Enquirer permanently scrubbed the stories from its archives and ceased publishing divorce rumors about the couple. The campaign of defamation that had lasted more than a decade ended quietly, with a handshake and a sealed agreement. The sudden resolution of the lawsuit raised questions that were never fully answered. Why had the McGraws filed such a massive lawsuit only to drop it weeks later? What had American media offered in exchange for the dismissal? And what did the confidentiality agreement prevent either side from revealing? The answers remain locked in the terms of the settlement, known only to the parties involved. But the legal battle with American media was not the only legal trouble Phil McGraw would face. Other disputes would follow, including a separate legal war with a former staffer named Leah Rothman, who had recorded behind-the-scenes footage and was accused of leaking information to the press. That case, like the tabloid lawsuit, ended in a settlement. The pattern was becoming clear. Whenever Phil McGraw faced serious legal challenges, the cases tended to be resolved quickly and confidentially. The public was left with questions, not answers, and the pattern of settlement suggested that there was more to the story than the public record revealed. Business scandals, bankruptcy, and current life. The McGraws' legal battles have extended far beyond tabloid defamation and into the realm of business disputes. In 2006, a class action lawsuit brought by disappointed consumers over a line of diet supplements called Shape Up reached a settlement of $10.5 million. The lawsuit had been filed in 2004 on behalf of 3 consumers who claimed McGraw had made fraudulent and unscientific weight loss claims about the supplements, which he had heavily endorsed. The plan required users to consume the product at a cost of $120 per month. The Federal Trade Commission had stepped in to investigate the brand's deceptive marketing, and the manufacturer agreed to stop making the supplements in early 2004. While the settlement fund was established with $6 million in vitamins and $4.5 million in cash. Insurance covered the costs, meaning McGraw had no personal financial obligation. He admitted no wrongdoing as part of the agreement. In 2009, a separate legal dispute emerged involving Robin McGraw's business ventures. Business partners Deborah Flattery and Brynja McGrady filed a lawsuit against the McGraws, alleging that Robin had breached contracts and committed fraud. The plaintiffs claimed that Robin had promised to feature their skincare products on the Doctor Phil Christmas special, but that the appearance never materialized. Instead, Robin allegedly chose to secretly launch her own independent skincare line. The plaintiffs sought $650,000 for expenses and $4 million for projected profits from the launch. The outcome of this lawsuit was not as widely reported as the other cases, but it added to the pattern of legal disputes that followed the McGraws' business ventures. These legal battles foreshadowed the most significant professional crisis of Phil McGraw's career. In early 2024, following the end of his 21-year daytime run, he launched a new venture called Merit Street Media, a multi-platform cable and digital network based in Fort Worth, Texas. The project was backed by a partnership with the Trinity Broadcasting Network, a global Christian media conglomerate, and was expected to involve a $500 million distribution arrangement. At launch, the network claimed to reach more than 80 million homes. It featured a primetime show hosted by Dr. Phil himself, along with programming from well-known television personalities. The network's troubles began almost immediately. According to court documents filed later, Merit Street's financial difficulties emerged within months of its launch. In July 2024, just 3 months after the network went live, it laid off approximately 40 employees, about 1/3 of its workforce. Another 40 employees were dismissed in June 2025 during a summer hiatus. Less than 2 years after its grand launch, Merit Street Media officially filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection on July 2, 2025. Court filings revealed assets and liabilities balancing precariously between $100 million and $500 million. The company listed over 200 creditors, including DirecTV, to which it owed $1.7 million, and Dish Network, to which it owed $900,000. It also owed $700,000 to Petoskey Productions, the production company owned by Phil McGraw that supplied content to the network. Despite the many challenges, Phil and Robin continue to live an ultra-luxury lifestyle. They split their time between a large, highly secure residential compound in Beverly Hills, California, and a secondary luxury estate in Texas. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen, like, and subscribe to our channel for more updates.